Hi everyone, it's me, Tim. Today I want to talk about great external ideas. And by that I mean ideas that came from outside the development team that were really good and worked and ended up in the game. This actually was a question from Brains and Beats, who asked, has there been a time when some person from higher up or just not on the dev or design team brought in an idea that was actually great? And I love this question because while I've frequently told stories that have people off the team not being shown in the best light, I love that this is a way to showcase some really good ideas that came from people who weren't on the development team. And I'm going to define the development team as people who worked on the game as their daily job. You know, everyone from the game director down to the most junior person is on the development team. Now, this took me a long time to answer, and I apologize to Brains and Beats, B&B. We're there, right? I can call you B&B. B&B asked this question months ago, but it's taken me a long time to answer, not because I wasn't thinking about it and not because I wasn't trying. It was because I could only think of a couple times someone off the dev team ended up with such a great idea that it went into the game, and I knew there were more. But every time I tried doing a search through my notes, the digitized ones, I couldn't figure out what term to use. I mean, the word good or the word idea literally shows up all the time. And external wasn't finding what I was looking for. So I wasn't sure what to look for, so I finally just decided to read my notes again. I just skimmed through everything. Which, as I've said, there are some of my notes I don't like reading. Either I don't think I did really good in this situation, or I've mentioned kind of the whole carbine notes. I just don't like reading through those again. But I did, because I knew that there were more than just a couple times. And I came up with 4 different times where, and for some of these, 4 different projects. And on those projects, it was more than one time that an idea came in externally that was so good we put it in the game. And those projects are Bard's Tale Construction Set, Fallout, Wildstar, and The Outer Worlds. So let's get into it. So Bard's Tale Construction Set, old game of mine. I was brought in as a contractor. I realized looking at my notes that the entire idea of this game, the idea of taking Bard's Tale 1, 2, and 3 and saying, let's make a construction set. Let's let players make their own maps and characters and monsters and spells, everything. That whole idea was given to me. I was hired as an external contractor. I was told this is what we want to do, and a very high-level design description. Now, I don't know where the idea came from, but it came from someone who hadn't been assigned to the team, so I know it was external. Looking at the credits for those games, there were lots of people who worked on the first 3 games who were still at Interplay. I mean, Brian Fargo, Becky Heineman, Bruce Schlickburn, they all worked on those games. So I don't know how much of the design spec that I received came from a particular person, but I know it came from people who ended up not being the developers of Bard's Tale Construction Set. So that's an interesting one right there. That's an entire game whose idea and genesis and high-level design was external. And then for Fallout, there were a couple things, and I know they've been mentioned in different videos here and there, but specifically, twice, there were 2 things that came, I know, from outside the team on Fallout. The first one was the name. When we tried coming up with a name, brainstorming, and we couldn't decide on anything. And then when Brian Fargo had played the game, he suggested Fallout, and that was what we shipped with. So that the entire name of this whole series came from no one on the team. And then the other one was when we were putting special into the game. I think I mentioned that special originally didn't have perks in it. And Chris Taylor had made this based on a homebrew system he had. And he presented it to me, and I think my only suggestion was, let's add luck to the attributes. So it was Specia before that, or Ace Ips, however you want to look at it. But then when we showed it to Brian Fargo, his suggestion was, I would like to have something more to buy when I go up a level than putting some points into skills. And since Chris and I both knew GURPS and we already had all the code, he was like, hey, I could design something sort of like advantages, but different. And the difference is, I mean, perks and advantages used very similar code, but advantages in GURPS were things you tended to front load. You bought them when you made the character. True, you could get them later, but the whole idea about them was, I'm making a character. What are their attributes, advantages and disadvantages, and I'll buy skills later. Well, Fallout kind of changed that and said, no, perks, you don't start with any perks. You can start with a trait, which is kind of a good thing and a bad thing glued together. But perks are something you buy as an advancement of your character. And the genesis of putting that in came from Brian Fargo. So the next one I want to talk about is Wildstar. I'm not a fan of really talking about that game, but I took over the design of it as design director in 2008, and we had to write up a setting description, and the original idea was that it was all going to take place on a planet that was the nexus of the multiverse. That if you had a coordinate system that defined your place in space-time and in a universe, the 0, point of that coordinate system was this planet. And that explained all the different things we wanted to put in, because we wanted some crazy stuff in there. And then it let us do what we called flux, where there'd be a flux point, and then some part of a zone would change and different things would appear there. Different kinds of vegetation, different kinds of creatures. It was an interesting idea. When we showed it to Jeff Strain, who was the acting president of production development at the newly formed NCSoft West, we were originally answering to NC Austin, and then they opened NCSoft West up in Seattle, and Jeff Strain had moved over from ArenaNet, and this was before Undead Labs. We showed him our story, and he suggested changing that backstory. He pointed out that it was so broad that it pretty much allowed everything. And if your setting doesn't easily answer the question of what is part of this setting and what isn't, and if the answer is everything's part of it, it's too broad. It doesn't really give your setting enough of a flavor when you can say anything. Oh, you want robots? Oh, you want magic? Oh, you want high tech? Oh, you want everything? It's too much. So he suggested changing it, and what we ended up switching it to was what the game ended up shipping with, which was this planet was the home planet of the precursor civilization that predated all the other races that were in the galaxy. And that worked, I think, really well for Wildstar. And it also was really cool because we explained the robots as this was the civilization that built those sentient robots. So it worked out. And then the last one I want to talk about is Outer Worlds. The Outer Worlds, the genesis of the idea, similar to Bard's Tale construction set, the genesis of the idea, the elevator pitch came from the owners, and that was Fallout meets Firefly. That's what I was told when I sat down with Leonard Borarsky and said, hey, I'm going to put together a new game at Obsidian, and the elevator pitch is Fallout meets Firefly. That was the leaping off point for everything we did after that. But then another thing that I found in my notes that I'd forgotten about was when we were putting together the specification for the whole game, not just the design specification, but we were trying to estimate personnel and therefore budget and time and all that. One of the things we put in was we said we wanted a producer. And we thought, hey, one producer is going to be enough. I mean, we know what we're doing. And Chris Parker, one of the owners, said, you need more than that. You need at least 4. And I remember I pushed back on that. I don't think we need 4 producers. I think one good lead producer will be enough. And he said, no. I really think you need more producers. Let me just tell you, we put that in. Chris Parker was absolutely 100% correct. We needed all 4 of those producers, and we worked them quite a bit. There was some external, I think we did external artwork. Producer managed that. We had lots of strike teams. Producers were assigned to those. We ended up interacting with the publisher a lot more than I thought we would. Remember I said when we started Outer Worlds, I was told we weren't going to use a publisher. So suddenly we had a publisher, and as much as I like Private Division, it was really nice having a producer who did the majority of the interaction with that and, told them things that were going on, showed them the state of the game, and then got their feedback and collated it for us. So that right there was something that, looking back, that was not something that came from us. It was suggested to us to have more than one producer. We ended up with 4, the suggested amount, and it was a great idea. I don't think I'd want to do a game anymore past a certain size without a number of producers just to handle the logistics and the day-to-day intercommunication between all the people who are on the team. So anyway, Brains and Beats, I hope that answered your question, and I hope that kind of shows that some really good ideas can come to your game from people outside of it.